It began with the sky tearing open, and it began everywhere at once. There was no first shell that I could name, no single ranging round to give us the half-second of warning that lets a man drop. The whole horizon to the east simply lit and roared in the same instant, a wall of sound that was not a sound at all by the time it reached us, but a pressure, a thing that came up through the ground and into the soles of the boots and the base of the skull. And then the earth around the lager was leaping. I had been standing by the track guard when it started, and I do not remember deciding to move. I remember being already at the hatch, already half inside, the steel rim catching me across the ribs as a near miss flung grit and stones against the hull like a fistful of nails thrown hard. And then I was down inside the fighting compartment with the breech of the gun against my shoulder, and the world reduced to the ringing dark of the inside of a tank under bombardment. The others were coming in after me, cursing, scrambling. The driver got to his seat, and the radio operator to his, and the commander came down last through the cupola, with his face already grey with the dust that was everywhere now, in the air, in the throat, in the thin light of the bulb. The loader was shouting something at me, and I could not hear a word of it, and did not need to. We both reached for the same ready round, and our hands knocked together, and he let me take it, and I had it in the breech. And the breech closed before I had thought about any of it, the drill doing my thinking the way drill is meant to. Outside, the barrage went on and on and on. I've been under fire many times since and before, but I had never been under anything like that, and I do not wish to be again. It did not slacken. It did not search for us and find us and move on the way a normal bombardment does. It simply sat on the whole position and ground it, minute after minute, each crash so close on the last that they ran together into one endless tearing roar. The tank rocked on its springs with the near misses. Earth came down on the deck above us in loads, in shovelfuls, in whole hillsides it seemed, until I half believed we would be buried before we were hit. Somewhere in it, the radio operator was trying to raise anyone at all, working the set, calling, and getting back nothing. Not silence, which would have been one thing, but a howling, shrieking nothing. The whole band torn to pieces, the air itself jammed solid with the noise of the guns. The commander told us what little he knew, which was almost nothing, that this was the offensive. The one we had been told for days was coming and had half stopped believing in, that the Russians were attacking, that we were to hold until there were orders, and that there were as yet no orders because there was no longer any way for orders to reach us. So we sat in the iron dark and took it, and being able to do nothing was the worst of it. A gunner wants a target, a driver wants a road. There is no drill for sitting still inside 30 tons of steel while the sky comes down, and a man's mind, with nothing to do, goes to bad places. I found myself counting, though I do not know what I was counting, and listening to the loader breathe, fast and shallow beside me, and watching the commander's boots on the turret floor as he stood up in the cupola again and again to try to see and drop down again each time the splinters drove him under. Once a round landed so close that the tank slid bodily sideways on the ground, a full hand's breadth, with a noise I felt in my fillings, and the lights went out and came back, and a fine rain of paint flakes and dust came down off the inside of the hull, and for one black instant I was certain we had been hit and were about to burn, and I clawed at nothing in the dark. We had not been hit, it had only been near. But there is no way from inside to tell the difference between very near and the end, and so a man dies a little with each one of them. And I died a great many small deaths in those minutes, and was no nearer the surface of the fear at the last of them than I had been at the first. The commander took a splinter across the back of his hand from something that came in through the open cupola, a small wound, nothing, and he bound it himself with one hand and his teeth and never stopped watching. And I have always remembered that. The small steadiness of it in the middle of so much that was not steady at all. Then the bombardment lifted, and the new silence was a lie. And we all knew it was a lie, because a barrage that lifts is a barrage that has finished doing the one thing and is about to start the next. The commander was up in the cupola in a heartbeat. I put my eye to the sight and swung the turret, by power now, the traverse working again, thank God, out across our front. And at first there was only the murk, dust and smoke from the shelling, hanging in great brown banks across the low ground, the early light somewhere behind it turning it the color of dirty wool. And then the commander began to give me the world in fragments, the way a tank commander does, his voice flat and quick and stripped of everything but the work, direction, range, target. And I traversed onto where he sent me and waited for the murk to give it up. It gave it up. The first shapes came out of the smoke, low and fast and wrong, and I knew them before I had really seen them, the way you know a thing you have been dreading, the slab fronts, the sloped plate, the long guns, T-34s. They came on in a loose line out of the brown dark, and behind them and among them, slower, higher, blunter, came the others, the heavy ones, the great ugly boxes that I had heard about and not yet met, the KVs. And there were a great many of them. They came out of the murk and kept coming out of it, more behind the first, the line of them stretching off into the smoke on either hand, farther than my sight would show me. And I understood with a cold lurch in the stomach that we were not looking at a raid or a probe, but at the thing itself, the whole weight of it rolling down on us out of the dawn. The commander gave me the nearest T-34 and a range, and I laid on it and fired, and the tank bucked and the compartment filled with the stink of the round, and the loader had the next one in before the empty case had finished clanging into the bag. I do not know if I hit with the first. There was too much smoke, too much movement. I fired again, and that time I saw the strike, saw the flash of it on the sloped front, and saw the round skate off and away into the sky, the whole shell turned aside by that cursed angled plate as a stone skips off water. I swore at it. I laid again, lower, for the place where the hull met the running gear and fired, and this time the T-34 stopped. Not brewed, not blown, just stopped, slewing, throwing a track, going still. And I had no time at all to feel anything about it because the commander was already swinging me onto the next. We fell into the rhythm of it then, the only rhythm that exists in a tank fight, and it took us over completely. Traverse. The commander's voice, a target, a range, lay. The thin black post of the foresight crawling onto a slab of moving steel, fire. The brutal slam of the recoil and the gun leaping back past my cheek and the breech spitting the case out hot and stinking into the bag. The loader's grunt as he heaved the next round home, his whole body in it, his face running with sweat and dust into a kind of grey mask with two white eyes in it. The clang of the breech, lay, fire. Again and again and again, until my shoulder was one long bruise from the eyepiece and my ears had given up entirely, and the whole inside of the turret was a fog of cordite that caught at the back of the throat and made the eyes stream. The empty cases piled up around our boots faster than the loader could kick them clear, rolling and clanging underfoot, scalding to the touch. The bulb swung. The compartment stank of burnt powder and hot oil and the sour reek of frightened men, and I loved my crew in that hour, the way you can only love men you are going to die with, and I never said so, and there was no time to say so, because the commander was already giving me the next. I stopped 2 more T-34s in that stretch, perhaps 3. One I caught broadside as it crossed our front, a clean hit low on the hull, and it did not stop or burn, but simply opened, the side of it splitting and a gout of something dark coming out, and it ran on for a few yards, driverless and dead, before it nosed into a fold of ground and was still. Another I took head on as it came straight for us, and I will not pretend it was skill, at that range and that bearing a man cannot really miss, and neither can the other fellow, and the only question is whose round goes home first. Ours did. The thing brewed up not 80 meters from our front, a hard yellow flash, and then the flame, and the wash of heat from it reached us even buttoned up. I did not look to see if anyone got out of that one. I had learned already, in the space of that single morning, not to look. And then something hit us. It came without warning, the way they always do, a blow on the turret front, like the whole world swinging a sledge against the steel a hand's width from my face. And the shock of it went through the tank and through me and snapped my head back off the eyepiece and split my brow on it so that the blood ran down into my eye, and I fought the rest of that fight half blind on one side. The round did not come through. The angle was wrong, or the range too long, or our plate held where it had no right to. I will never know which, and I have stopped asking. But for a moment the whole crew froze in the certainty that we were finished, and then the certainty passed and we were not finished. We were still moving and still firing, and the loader was laughing, a wild, cracked laugh, and slapping the inside of the hull as though it were the flank of a horse that had jumped well. And I wiped the blood out of my eye with the back of my glove and got back on the sight, because the commander had not stopped for any of it and was already calling the next. But there were always more, and that is the thing about that day, that I've never been able to make anyone understand who was not on that ground. It was not that they were better than us, tank for tank, crew for crew. They were not. We outshot them and outkilled them, and we knew our trade, and they were green and clumsy and brave past all sense. It was that there were so many of them that for every one we sent burning into the dust, 2 more came on out of the smoke behind it, that the line of them simply did not end. And a regiment, however good, has only so many rounds and so many barrels and so many hours of nerve in it, and they had more of everything than we could spend. We fought them like that for a while that I cannot measure. Time in a tank action is not time. It is rounds and movements of the turret and the commander's voice and the loader's hands and the awful concentration of the sight picture. And all of it happens in a kind of furious present with no before and no after. We were good. I will say that for us, for that morning the crew was good. We had been together long enough that we worked without words, and we knocked down more than our share of them. But for everyone, we stopped. There were more in the smoke, and the T-34s were bad enough, and then the heavy ones came into range, and the heavy ones were a nightmare. I put round after round into the first KV that came at us and watched every one of them fail. I hit it. I know I hit it, square and true, at a range where I could not have missed. And the rounds simply broke apart on it or bounded off it, and the great thing came on, as though I had thrown gravel. The commander was calling corrections, and I was making them, and it made no difference. We did not have the gun for it. We had never had the gun for it, and there is a particular horror in firing your best and watching it not matter, in being a man with a hammer against a thing that a hammer cannot touch. The KV came on, and its own gun was traversing toward us, slow and certain, and the commander did the only thing left and told the driver to move, to get us out of the line of it, and the driver threw us back and around so hard that I lost the sight picture entirely and was thrown across the loader. That throw saved us. The KV fired in the same instant, and the round went through the air where our flank had been a half-second before. I did not see it, but I felt it, a great invisible fist punching the air past the hull, close enough that the whole tank seemed to flinch from it. And it struck the ground beyond us and threw up a column of earth as tall as a house. Had the driver been a heartbeat slower, we would have been a burning hole in the steppe like the others, and we all knew it, and no one said anything, because there was nothing to say and no breath to say it with. The commander only told the driver, low and fast, to keep moving, to never give it a still shot, and the driver kept us weaving, the engine howling, while I tried to get back on the thing and put something into it that might matter. I never did. I fired at that KV until I had no angle left and no hope left, and I might as well have been throwing my helmet at it. There is a particular and total helplessness in it that I have never felt since, and pray I never feel again. To do everything right, To lay true and fire fast and hit clean, and to watch it count for nothing, to watch the great slab thing absorb your best work and grind on toward you with its own gun coming round. A man can face a fair fight. It is the unfair one that breaks something in him. And all along that line that morning, our fight with the heavies was that one, and I think it was the heavies more than anything, more than the trains, more even than the sheer numbers, that told us in our bones that this was a day we were not going to win. And then the trains began. I did not understand it at first. There was a new note in the chaos, a heavier, more regular hammering than the tank guns, salvos of it coming in from somewhere off to the flank with a railway regularity, and the ground where it landed did not crater so much as erupt. It was only later that I learned what it had been: the armored trains, the Soviet trains with the tank turrets bolted onto their cars, sitting back on the line and firing into us as steadily as a man drives nails. At the time, it was simply another kind of death arriving from another direction, and the effect of it was to make the whole position untenable, to put fire onto the very ground we would have fallen back across, so that there was no clean way out and no good way to stay. One of those train salvos walked straight across our front as we maneuvered, a row of eruptions marching toward us with that hideous railway evenness, one and the next nearer, and the next nearer still, each one closer than the last in a perfect remorseless line. And I sat behind the gun and watched the line of them come on, and could do nothing about it at all, because you cannot shoot a train you cannot see with a tank gun, and a man behind a gun who can do nothing is the most useless and frightened creature on a battlefield. The driver felt it, or saw it through his slit, and threw us out of the path of the march of them at the last possible instant, and the round that should have had us threw its earth into the air where we had stood. I do not know how many times that morning we lived on the driver's hands and nothing else, more than I care to count. Through the sight as the driver fought us round, I saw one of ours die. It was a panzer from our own company, 50 or 60 meters off, and I caught it in the instant it was struck, saw the hit, saw the tank shudder, and then saw the thing that every tank man carries in him as a private terror, the bright lance of flame that comes up out of the hatches when the rounds inside go off, the whole machine turning in a moment from a fortress into a furnace. The hatches flew. Men came out of them, or tried to. I saw one get clear, a black shape rolling off the engine deck into the dirt and crawling, and I did not see the others come out at all, and the tank stood there and burned with that flat, roaring flame that does not stop until there is nothing left to feed it. I had eaten with those men. I turned my eye back to the sight because there was nothing else I could do for them, and because the commander was shouting a new target at me, and I have been ashamed of the relief I felt at having something to look at that was not that burning tank. And I have never told anyone of it until now. It could not go on. We all felt it tip over from a battle into a rout, though no one said the word. The fire was coming from three sides now. I could hear it, feel it, see the strikes walking in toward us from the front and from the right, where the trains were, and from somewhere up to the north as well. And the order, when it finally clawed its way through the wrecked air to us, was not an order to attack or to hold, but the order every soldier dreads and is grateful for in the same breath: to fall back, to get what we could to a new line. The radio operator passed it on, and his voice cracked on it, and the commander only said, "Lo," that we were going, and told the driver where, and we went. The falling back was its own battle, and in some ways the worse one, because in the attack, at least we had been facing the thing, and now we had to turn our flank and our backs to it, and run across open ground, with the T-34s faster than us and the heavies' guns still able to reach. There was no order to it that I could see from inside. Only tanks and half-tracks and running men all streaming back the same way, churning the dust up into a fog of our own that was the only thing that saved a good many of us, I think. The Russians could not see to shoot any better than we could see to run. We went flat out, the driver wringing everything out of the engine, the whole hull shaking, and twice the commander had me fire blind into the murk behind us, not to hit anything but to make them keep their heads down and their distance. And perhaps it helped and perhaps it did nothing. I did not see what I was shooting at. I only loaded and laid roughly and fired and loaded again, facing backward into the smoke we had made, while the driver took us across that broken ground toward a piece of higher, harder country where the order said we were to make a stand. The run back is a string of pictures with no thread between them, each one cut loose from the last by the speed and the smoke and the terror. A half-track full of men, our own off to our left, taking a direct hit as it ran and simply ceasing to be a half-track, becoming in an instant a spray of metal and a black cloud, and out of that black cloud, impossibly, one figure walking, just walking, away from it, until he too went down. A tank of ours, throwing a track at the gallop and slewing to a dead stop broadside in the open, the worst place at the worst moment, and the crew boiling out of it and running, abandoning the machine where it sat, and I lost them in the dust and never knew. Infantry on foot streaming back among us, men with no armor around them at all, their faces turned up at us as we passed, and one of them got a hand to our deck and hauled himself up and rode there clinging to the turret stowage with his eyes shut, and we carried him in, and that was one man saved out of that whole ruin, and it felt, absurdly, like a victory. An anti-tank gun of ours, somehow still in action, still firing east into the murk over open sights as everything fled past it, the crew staying to cover the route, and I have thought of those men many times since, and hoped that some of them lived, though I do not really believe it. We reached it. Not all of us reached it. We came up onto the new ground in the late part of the morning with the engine screaming and the radiator near to boiling and the whole crew soaked through and deaf. And the driver brought us in among the others who had made it and shut down, and for the first time in hours there was no shell falling directly on us, and the silence, the relative silence, the silence that still had the battle muttering away in it off to the west, came down on us like a weight. I got the hatch open and put my head out into air that was not the inside of the tank and was sick over the side of it, and was not ashamed of that because I saw other men doing the same. And then I looked around at what was left, and that is the picture I have carried away from that day more than any other. Not the burning tank, not the KV I could not kill, but the look of the company, of the regiment drawn up on that ridge in the noon light. There was so little of us. I had gone into that morning as one tank among many, in a regiment, in a division of 3 panzer battalions, and I came out of it onto that ridge and could count what remained on my fingers and my comrades' fingers together. A panzer division, someone said bitterly, climbing down from the next tank, that now had no more running tanks than a motorized division. And it was true. That was the size of it. 24 or so machines where there should have been many times that number. The rest of them dead on the steppe behind us, or limping in still in 1s and 2s, throwing tracks, towing one another, the wounded riding on the engine decks. The commander climbed down and went to make his report, and came back with his face shut tight, and after a while he told us a little of it, that Major Gradl was dead, that the battalion had been gutted, that the Kampfgruppe had been mauled from every side at once, and had only got off the field at all because someone high up had finally let us. He did not say much about General Heim or what the division would do now. I do not think he knew. I do not think anyone knew up on that ridge, with the dust still falling and the day not even half spent. We had been beaten. There is no other honest word for it. We had gone out in the dark, a proud regiment of an army that had not yet learned that summer what it was to lose, and we had been smashed flat in a single morning by men we had been taught to despise, and an artillery we had been taught did not exist in such quantities and tanks we could not kill. We sat on the hard ground in the shade of the few machines we had left and did not talk much. Someone passed water along, someone wept quietly, and no one minded. I cleaned the breech because my hands needed something to do and because a clean gun was the one thing in all the world that was still inside my power. The smoke stood up in columns all along the eastern sky where the morning had happened, and the trains were still firing far off, the hammering of them coming to us thin and steady on the hot air, and we sat on our ridge in the middle of the day, and were, for that hour, simply men who had lived with nothing left in us but the living. I went looking, when my legs would hold me, for the crew of a tank I had trained with, friends of mine, 4 of them, men whose families I knew by name from 100 evenings of talk. Their machine was not on the ridge. I asked along the line, and a man told me he thought he had seen it go up early, in the first rush when the heavies came in. And another said no, he was sure he had seen it limping off to the south, and a third said nothing at all, and only looked away. And that told me more than the other 2 together. I never did find out, that day or after, with any certainty. That is the cruelty of a rout that the histories never quite catch. Not the men you watch die, terrible as that is, but the men who simply are not there afterward, who become a question with no answer. A name you go on saying for a while, and then stop saying. By the noon of that 9th of August, I had a fistful of such names, and I have them still. Then word came down that we were to dig in where we stood, and a man does not argue with a thing to do, and I climbed back up onto the tank and got the spade, and we began. If you want to experience this story in full, in a continuous audiobook format, without interruptions or ads, the complete version is available in the description. There's also an option that includes a written version of the story if you prefer to read along. And of course, it's a direct way to support our work, since the channel isn't monetized. If you're interested, you'll find everything in the link below.